All right. Hello. Can everyone hear me? Right. Plarium, go away. All right. How's everyone doing? We just had a bunch of grades release, and I know for some teams it was a little bit tough. The good news is that this tends to be one of the more difficult periods in the entire semester. This is typically the deliverable that marks a turning point for a lot of teams. So, hey, if you're not feeling super great after the latest deliverables, don't panic, don't worry. There's still a lot of time. There's still a lot of points left on the board. Video driver, yeah. Okay, so let's go ahead and get right into it. A few announcements, and actually this is much more of a tip. Many of you will be going on to internships soon. Many of you will be going on to new teams, whether they be in industry or whether they be in academia. And one of the challenges that you'll have to face right away is onboarding. Onboarding, kind of the process of becoming a new team member and then getting up to speed so that you can be productive, so that you can contribute quickly to your new team. Well, new employee onboarding periods tend to be a little bit tough, right? Your mentor will say to you, hey, come to me with any questions. You confused about the software? Are you confused about, who's here on your team, who you should talk to? You can always come to me. However, when they say that, they're not actually hoping that you'll come to them every single time, because as it turns out, interns and new hires are really, really expensive, not only in terms of money, but also in terms of time and attention. So one of the things that you can do that I've seen be extremely effective, that can ease your mentor's burden and also help you meet the rest of the team, is to establish kind of a round-robin setup where when you have a question, when you need help with something, you actually have a list of all of your team members. And when you go to get help from someone, you go to wherever the pointer is on that list. So you go to your mentor first, right? But then once you get help, you move that pointer down the list, and the next time you have a problem, the next time you have a question, you go to that other team member, and then you go to the next team member, and the next, and the next, until you go and wrap around and you're back at your mentor. One of the really, really cool benefits of this is that you get your questions answered, but you are also not eating up a ton of any one person's time. Also, because you're talking to a bunch of different people and learning from them, you're going to get to know many members of your team. You're going to earn their respect, and it's going to be a really good time for you. Okay. So when you go on to when you go on to your internships, when you go on to your full-time jobs, or when you go to academia, try and remember this if you can. It's a really, really successful technique. Okay. So well done to all of you on P3 Milestone 2. This is really often the toughest deliverable, as I said a few minutes ago. It is right in the middle of P3, and this tends to be the deliverable where a lot of teams kind of find their game's identity. They kind of find something that their game does really well, and something that they're able to hang their hat on and go and build new content around and polish up. If you're not quite there yet, don't panic quite yet. But you do need to sit down with your team members, as you're going to hear from a bunch of our feedback video. You do need to sit down with your team, and you need to figure out where you want this game to go in the next week or so, okay? Often, this is a good time to think about cutting features that aren't really contributing to your game's core. If a feature is not exciting your players, if you can't see them engaging deeply with some sort of feature or mechanic in your game through the video footage you receive, then you might want to consider cutting it, right? Simplify. Maybe you can kind of pare down how many mechanics you have and thus give them a lot more attention, right? They get a lot more investment, you polish them up. Maybe they're not your favorite mechanics in the world, but after a bunch of polish, they could be very effective for engaging players. Anyway, though, hang in there, don't give up. You will make it through, okay? Another thing, so I have a story about cross-country. So back in high school, back in my cross-country and track kind of career, I noticed something. I noticed that my coach always seemed to be picking on me. And to give you some context, I was always one of the team members who was either like the number one on junior varsity or the last place person on the varsity team. And so I was right there in the middle, and the coaches really stood to benefit. The team stood to benefit from my performance every single week, right? I had a lot of agency to really help the team or hurt them on any given day. And so we would go out on these long runs. We'd go out on runs that sometimes got up to 14 miles long. And what I would notice, I'd get into a groove. I'd be jogging with my friends on the team. And what I noticed was that I always got chewed out, right? The coach would see me, and I'd be running pretty hard. But he'd see me, he'd grab his head, he'd throw it on the ground, say, "Damn it, Yarger, what are you doing? What are you doing? Get up there, go, go, go," right? And it was always very embarrassing, when that happened. And I noticed that it never really happened to my teammates, who I tended to be running with. I would run with kind of older members of the team, and they never got the chewing out that I did. What I discovered after a while was that it wasn't because my coach was annoyed at me or angry at me in particular. It's because my coach still had some hopes for me, still had goals for me, still thought I could be a lot better. The people that I was running with, often, they were toward the end of their careers. They'd kind of petered out, leveled off at their skill level. And I was still pretty young in my career, right? The coach still thought that I had a lot of potential to improve myself. And so eventually it kind of hit me that really it's not a bad thing necessarily when the coach is expressing frustration or at least giving you feedback, right? Paying attention to you. The worst thing is when the coach stops paying attention to you, because that's when you're about to get cut, okay? Cut from the team. You are no longer the focus of attention. So anyway, that goes to say that sometimes when we're giving our feedback, I feel bad about it. We can sometimes be a little bit intense, maybe a little bit more negative or a little bit more frustrated than we really are. And part of that is because we see so much potential in all of you and all of your projects. And we really, really, really want you to reach that potential. It might be a little bit uncomfortable, but the pain tends to fade, and quickly, when you get to your potential. So we know you can do it, okay? If we are a little bit down in some of your feedback videos, don't let it get you down. We are sometimes a little bit frustrated because we care so much about where you end up, okay? So hang in there. Don't let it bother you. We're on your side. We're on your team. And I cannot wait to see where you end up on the 21st. It's I have a very good feeling. You're all working so hard, and that tends to bring very good news. Okay, so let's continue going. Joe Dodson says, my archery coach used to pick on me because he knew when I was good and then I was bad when I came to college. College is a different environment. I remember in school, and I think this is the case for many Michigan students, you're in high school, you're kind of at the top of your class, you are not being super challenged by all of your courses, and then you get to Michigan, and it is an entirely new level of challenge and difficulty and discipline that you face here. And it can take a few semesters to kind of get up to speed. But yeah, that definitely happens. Okay, so let's keep going. I have an interesting note on the topic of ergonomics and multiplexing of fingers. In other words, fingers do not multiplex very well, okay? If you have your fingers on the WASTA keys, which many games use for movement mechanics, but you also put a key, for instance, on E. That can work, and some games do that. However, when your index finger is pressing the E key to interact with something, it cannot be pressing the D key. If you take your left hand right now and you just place them on A, W, and D, you could not be pressing E and D at the same time unless you shift two of your fingers over to cover E and D simultaneously. And that is a very, very strange formation. The result is that if a player really wants to feel like they're moving through an environment quickly, right? They're running over here, they're interacting while they're still moving, they can't really do that very effectively because they can't be walking right and interacting at the same time. So this is often when you want to try and get the buttons into another hand, right? The hands can do different things simultaneously. So if you have WASTA, and then, for instance, you have like the M key or N key be interact, then you can be running around, you can hit N, you can hit M at any time. It's no big deal. Likewise, if your other hand has a mouse in it, then you can do a lot of stuff with that mouse that doesn't interfere with your actions on WASTA. So think about when you're, it almost seems super low level, right? You don't often think of this maybe, but when it comes to perfectly kind of tuning your controls, think about what each hand is doing at any given time, and when the player is doing something, does that eliminate the possibility for anything else? When the player is interacting, can they be walking to the right? If the answer is no, then you might want to think about your control scheme a little bit, okay? Okay, so all right. What I'd like to do is I'd like to actually show you something we used to do a lot in the in-person semesters is we used to show you some P3 games from the past to kind of inspire you, to give you an idea of where these games tend to end up and what a really, really successful project looks like given the time constraints that you have on P3. So I would like to show you a game called Star Witch, which you can actually download online from itch.io and play if you want to. We'll show you this game. It's a very, very awesome, awesome game. I believe it was done last semester. And it has a number of things I'd like to talk about. It's relatively brief, it escalates, but it also kind of interweaves narrative and context as well. So let's go ahead and wait for the game to launch. Okay, so hopefully this isn't too laggy. Oh, it is a little bit laggy, isn't it? Oh, that's really unfortunate. Yeah, it's laggy. I think my computer's dying, sadly. Okay, yeah, we can't play this. That's really disappointing. Really disappointing. But I'll have to throw the link to you. Let me grab the link real quick so you can all check it out, and then we'll probably briefly talk about it. Actually, we can do so right here. 494showcase.com. I think I might need to get a new computer before the showcase. Okay, so Star Witch can be played on the 494showcase.com website, and it is a very kind of cool game. We'll be able to see a little bit of it from the trailer, but the game does a really nice job of integrating its story and characters into these kind of puzzle platforming challenges. Come on, let's go. It makes excellent use of parallax and a kind of 8-bit aesthetics. The game begins with an intro cutscene and then intersperses a tiny intro cutscene between every stage. At the beginning of every stage, you can actually see your opponent here, the main antagonist, which is this Chaos Witch, actually spawning the enemies that you have to deal with into the environment. The enemies trap the citizens of that planet that you're on, and you spend the stage kind of rescuing them. This could have been a game where you simply solve some basic puzzles to get to the end of the stage, right? The goal at the end. But interspersing some of these characters that you have to save provides a lot of narrative value. You get to see the kind of destruction that this Chaos Witch is placing upon the planet and throughout the galaxy, and then your goal is to kind of put a stop to that. It lends a lot of context and a lot of motive to everything you do, which is really neat. But anyway, it also has really great pacing, and it only lasts about 15 minutes. So every about 5 minutes or so, you get a new spell, which allows you to interact with the environment in a new way. You get to a new level, which makes use of not only the new spell, but also the old spells that you had used and learned and studied previously. And then at the very end, there's a suitable climax where you need to deal with and confront the main antagonist here. So a very cool game. I encourage you to play it. It's an excellent example of a high-quality P3. Okay, so let's go ahead and get out of there. Okay, something I'd like to do a little mini lecture on the topic of the line renderer. So who has heard of the line renderer? Has anyone used it? So the line renderer is a really cool little piece of simple tech that is built into Unity. I'm going to show you how to use it in a sec, but I want to show you how you could use it. Here's an example of a game, a tower defense game, that is in development, and it makes use of the line renderer that you see here in order to show off the vision distance of each tower. So you've got this little box tower, you've got a raccoon tower, and when you hover over them, you can see how far they can see. This line render, this geometric shape is built using a line renderer. So let's go ahead and show you another instance of this. This is a line renderer being used for click feedback. So you notice when we click the ground, we actually get this little burst of kind of star shape. And that makes the act of clicking, the act of interacting with things in the game, feel a lot better. It is visual feedback that essentially allows the player to confirm that, yes, the game did register my click on this particular tile. Okay, so the question then is, how do we implement this? How do we do something like this? And the answer is we can do it really quickly, actually. So let's go ahead, and I'm going to show you a little line renderer demo. The first thing, I'm actually going to delete this line renderer example script because that is what I did in preparation. So let's say that we've got our game here, and we just want a circle. We just want a cool circle. We want to draw it, and maybe in the future like in the examples we showed, we'll have the vertices of that circle kind of go in and out, weave in and out, and go around in a circular motion. And that could be really, really cool. But for now, let's just get a circle rendered. Well, the first thing that we need is we need a component. We need a new component that's going to handle this rendering of the circle. Let's call this render circle or something. So we've got this new component called render circle. Now, in order to render a line, we need a component that Unity actually provides to us. It is called the line render component. And as you'd guess, it renders lines. So the line render component is pretty cool. It allows us to draw little lines like what you see here. But we want to draw something way more interesting than just a line. So let's go into our render circle component. And let's get a little bit of setup out of the way. This render circle component can't do its job unless a line render component is also on this game object. So what we can do is we can go require component, type of, and then let's go line render. Okay. Now what we can do is this is going to enforce that there's always a line render component on this game object. In fact, if we try and get rid of the one that we already have, which you can see right here, Unity is going to tell us that's a no-go. So let's go ahead and remove it. It says can't remove line render because render circle component depends on it. So that's awesome. Okay, so let's go ahead and store a reference to our line render. We'll just call it LR. We'll fill that reference right away when the game starts. LR equals get component, grab that line render component and put it into our LR variable. And now we actually want to do some stuff. So the first thing we should do is let's just draw a line, just to be careful, okay? Well, the line render component has a bunch of functions on them. The two most important is going to be set positions. This takes an array of vector3 positions, so an array of positions. These become our vertices. And then, confusingly, the line render also needs to have its vertex count set to something. So let's say we're going to have 2 points, and this needs to be replaced with, what is it, position count. Cool, there you go. So we say, hey, this line render is going to have 2 vertices, and then we need to determine what those 2 vertices are. Let's go ahead and create a list of vertices. Vector3, we'll just call this vertices. Okay, and we will provide 2 values here. So let's say that we want to just draw a horizontal line. So we're going to say, hey, how about vector3.left times 3? And then we're going to add one that's in the opposite direction, vector3.right times 3. Then, since this is a list and this function right here, set positions, requires an array, what we can do is we can just convert it to an array, okay? Okay, so let's go ahead and see what happens. When we start the game, hopefully we'll see this pink line going from left to right. Okay, so we're launching the game, and hey, there we are. There we go. Except if you look at this, it actually looks kind of not great, does it? It does not look great. Because it is a pink line, it's a little bit it's a little bit of a thick line. So let's go ahead and that whenever we see that pink, Unity is trying to tell us that we don't have the right material. So let's do this -3, and then we can also edit the positions in our editor over here if we want to. Okay, so we got our line back. Now let's go ahead and provide a new material. What kind of material are we thinking about here? Okay, we've got the simple default diffuse. We got a particle line. Ooh, that's kind of interesting. It stretches a particle here. What else do we have? I kind of like this sprite. This is just sprite default. So let's go with that. So we can also change the color. Let's go ahead and change the color to, oh, that's really cool. I really like this light blue though. Oh, look at that. Wow. Okay. So we've got this cool light blue line, and I want to make it a little bit thinner. So where do we set the base width? With a base width, I think it's in here somewhere. We can definitely do it here if we want to. There we go. Okay, so it's a little bit of a thinner line now. And so now, when we play the game, our line looks a little bit better, but we don't really want a line. Let's try for something like a circle, okay? Let's try for something like a circle. So we got our line going on. It's a little bit boring. Let's say, you know what? I really want these vertices to not be in a line, but I want them to go around a circle. I want to be able to control how many vertices we have. So num vertices, let's say it's going to be like 5, okay? Now, we also need to calculate how much of our circle each vertex is going to have. So in terms of radians. So let's call it delta radians. It's going to be 2 times mathf.pi. So that's our full circle, 2 pi. And then we need to divide by the number of vertices that we have. Okay. So let's go ahead and iterate through our vertices. Int I equals 0, I is smaller than num vertices, I plus plus. And now we need to figure out where we are in that circle. So our t value is going to be delta radians times I. This is to say that t is going to just about get to 2 pi by the time we've iterated through each of our vertices. So we can use this t value to calculate a position on the circle. So vector 3, let's call this new circle position. And we can use a little bit of trig to get that position, okay? On the x-axis, we're going to use cosine, okay? We feed t in. On the y-axis, we don't want to do anything because we're just going to stay on the xz plane. And then on the z-axis, we want to use the opposite of cosine. We're going to use sine. So let's go ahead and throw t in there. We also need to make this circle bigger. We can adjust the radius by just multiplying this value. Let's multiply it by 5 or so, okay? Okay, we have a new position now, and let's go ahead and do something really quickly. We need to add this new position to our vertices. Dot add new circle position. But before we actually draw this, what I'd like to do is I'd like to actually draw it in our scene view so that we can verify everything's working. So on draw gizmos, let's go ahead and for int I equals 0, I is smaller than vertices. This is not a member variable, it's a local one. So we're going to go ahead and change that. Let's go ahead and bring it out here. There we go, good. Okay, so we're going to iterate through our vertices. And we're going to use the gizmo class to go ahead and draw a sphere wherever we have one of these vertices. So vertices I, as we iterate through them, we're going to have a 0.25 radius. Let's see what happens. It looks like this position count is going to be messed up though. So let's go vertices dot length. Yeah, hold on. Vertices dot count. Length is a property of arrays, not lists. Okay, so let's see what happens. We're going to play the game, and then hopefully in our scene view, we will be able to see the little spheres at some positions around our circle. Bop, bop, bop. Hey, all right. Cool, look at that. So we can see our spheres here. And because there's only 5 vertices, we have this really downsampled circle. It's not smooth at all. We also have this gap right here, which I'm not a big fan of. So let's go ahead and address that gap first. As soon as we are done drawing a line, we also need to draw that line back to the initial position. So after we're done calculating our vertices, we're going to do one final vertice that is simply the first vertice. Okay? So there you go. Let's make sure that fixes it. All right, there we go. There's a little bit of a hitch there, but I think we can adjust the roundness of the end values in the inspector here. I don't care about it too much. It should be pretty easy to fix. So let's change this. Because of the way that we program this, it's going to be very easy to kind of customize how many vertices we want. So we've gone from 5 vertices, which produces this really kind of jagged circle. Let's go up to, oh, I don't know, 30, and see how it looks. Ba-ba-ba-ba-ba. Here we go. Oh, that's awesome. Look at that. That's very cool, isn't it? Oh my gosh. It is very, very, very smooth, and it only cost us about 30 vertices. So this is the kind of thing that could be extremely valuable. If you're trying to add juice to your game, if you're trying to add guidance to your game, if you have a mechanic that needs the player to follow a line for some reason, if you need the ability to generate and manipulate kind of arbitrary polygon shapes, then this could be extremely valuable for you. Your aesthetic team, whoever's handling the aesthetics on your team, could get a lot of value out of something like this. And this is something that can be programmed really, really fast. It is actually, hold on. One last thing I want to do here is I want to change the width a little bit. So can we do this? Oh, that's really cool. Look at that. Look at that. It, wow, that's super cool. Look at it. It looks almost like a loading screen. Huh. It looks almost like a little loading screen. If we made this rotate, then that's essentially what we would have. That's really, really cool. Let's go in and I want to adjust the color a little bit. We got this nice gradient, but maybe we can make it even fancier. So let's put in another little color tag in here. Let's have it transition from blue. So we got a little bit of blue there at the tail, though it's a little bit hard to see. So I'm going to go ahead and bring this out a little bit. Good, it's easier to see now. Blue, we got some red in here. Can we get an orange in here? Okay, we got some orange in here. We got a little bit of pink going on. That's pretty cool. Ooh, that's really, really neat. I feel like this blue, though, should be a yellow, and this orange and this red in the middle should be orange, and then it should be red toward the end. So we've got this kind of gradual warming of our colors. Ooh, that's really cool. That's really, really cool. And then we've got this kind of white at the end. So that's really neat. Anyway, there's a lot of fun to have. There's a lot of fun to have with the line render. It's very, very powerful. It allows you to essentially draw arbitrary shapes, and I encourage you to experiment with it, okay? It's a powerful tool. All right, so does anyone have any questions on that? Any questions? Okay. So a reminder, EECS 499 is a kind of a research course that you can take along with the Wolverine Soft Studio. If you're interested in continuing to work in games, experiment with games, take courses that relate to games, EECS 499 is one of your best options. A little reminder, it is kind of the directed research course, so you get to choose how many credits you want to take the course for, and then you have to invest number of credits times 3 hours every week, and you can invest that in any sort of game-related research project that you might want to pursue. So gamifying the EECS autograders is something we've done before. We had a student build a game that Twitch viewers could play. He built, Michael Siciliano, who's now at Jackbox Games in Chicago, he built a game which takes essentially commands that you type in as a Twitch viewer into the chat. A Twitch bot then takes those commands, feeds them into the game that's running, and that allows your Twitch viewer to essentially control an avatar inside of the game. We had a student use convolutional neural nets to control a Fire Emblem kind of agent to kind of play through, I think, an emulated version of the game. And yeah, really, really fun stuff. It tends to be much more relaxed than 494 is. Yeah, it's a good time. If you're interested, fill out the form, okay? By the way, Ish, if you're watching, can you post this this lecture agenda to the schedule for today so students can get to that link? Thank you. Okay, and there's also the Wolverine Soft Studio, which you can join if you want to for credit by just going into the Wolverine Soft Discord server. I think Amber has the form that you need to make that happen. Okay? Okay, so many of you are going to be receiving contact from freelancers pretty soon, if you haven't already. And when you start interacting with people who are external to your team, maybe your team doesn't have a ton of music knowledge and experience on it. That's fine. IRL, what you'll often do is you'll either hire a full-time employee, or you will find someone who works on a bunch of different companies' projects, and you will hire them for a certain amount of music. When you do this, right, when you get that email from the musician or from a 3D artist or from your voice actor, then you need to be very careful with your communications. You really want to provide references if you can. You want to help your external party understand what you are trying to accomplish as clearly as possible. That minimizes the risk that you're going to spend 2 or 3 weeks and you're going to end up being given a piece of art or a piece of music that you can't really use. It doesn't fit right, or it isn't to your expectations. And so you want to do several things. You want to provide a ton of references, if you can. This is what we're going for. Here's the kind of music we're going for. Here's the kind of art style we're going for. You want to provide the game if you can. And you really want to set some sort of deadline, right? So, okay, we expect to receive some rough draft in a week, okay? Or, we expect the full first song to be done in 2 weeks. You negotiate with your external party. You make sure that's going to work for them. They think it's going to work. You think it's going to work. It's going to be here in time for you to integrate it. If you don't have a deadline, these kinds of things have a habit of moving backward and backward and backward until suddenly you're not getting anything on time, and you just don't have any time to integrate the thing that you might get. So make sure that you always have a deadline. It's okay if you push those things back if you need to, but you need to have some sort of goal that everyone has in mind for completing the project, for completing the assets. Okay, all right, set up a low latency communication channel, such as Discord, Slack, some sort of instant messaging. Don't rely only on email. It tends to be very slow and easy to miss emails in your inbox can get buried. And also, you want to set up an instant communication method as well. For instance, get their phone number, okay? If it is the night before the showcase and you still don't have their work and you think they're sleeping, you don't know where they are, yeah, you're really going to want to have that phone number so you can call them and say, hey, what's going on? Where are you, right? It's really important to be able to do that in a last resort scenario, okay? All right. So an assignment has released. You've got another week, another technical deliverable. This one, though, is slightly interesting. So your iteration.txt has changed. It has shifted and evolved. Uh-oh. All right. I need to log in here. Let me see here. For whatever reason, even when you're logged in to an account that does have access to a document like this, sometimes Google will just choose to try with an account that doesn't have access, and it's really strange. You'd think they'd have enough engineers paid well enough to figure this out, but it's been an issue for years. If any of you are going to work at Google, please consider fixing this. Okay. So, all right, so your big new change for this P3 alpha assignment is the introduction of a dev blog submission. When you look at your deliverable section, you no longer have an iteration.txt file to submit. What you now have is a devblog.txt document. And this document needs to essentially give us links to your online dev blogs. What do I mean by dev blogs? Well, you're going to have dev blogs at 2 locations for your game. You're going to have one at indiedb.com. Let's take a look. Indiedb.com is an online website of games, of indie games, of large games, of all sorts of stuff. And if you look, you can actually see a bunch of examples of dev blogs that are out there. A dev blog is essentially when you make changes to your game and then you write and tell everyone about it. You often post a new version of the build. You often post images. You post screenshots. I have no idea what game this is. It looks like a mermaid game. That's kind of cool. And then you explain essentially what we plan to do for next week. So that is essentially an evolved form of your iteration.txt. I'll show you what this tends to look like on tigsource.com, the independentgamesource.com. This website has an entire board for devlogs. And you can see just tons of games getting updated every single day. And it's pretty exciting. False Skies, a Game Boy Color styled class-based RPG. You've got demos, you've got feature description, you've got images, you've got video, and I'm pretty sure you're required to have at least one image now. But anyway, this is what you're going to do every week to inform your staff, your classmates, and the wider public about what advances you're making on your project, okay? The reason we're doing this is because you're almost finished with this course, which for many of you means you're almost finished with your college career. It's sometimes said that the magic of college is that it's one of the last times that you can make mistakes without grave consequences. You can build a technology that doesn't work, right? You can design stuff that doesn't work. If you get to grad school, if you get to your industry job and you design a piece of technology that ends up malfunctioning and hurting people, that is like disaster, okay? And so we need to start getting our technologies out there. We need to start putting them out to the public, getting that realistic feedback, because when you graduate, that's how it's going to be. You're going to be putting stuff out to the public, and it's usually painful, but that's how it goes, okay? So we'll get more used to it. We're going to get a taste of that this week, okay? Hopefully it won't be too painful. I don't think so. It usually isn't too bad. But, okay. So that's your devlog. Now, the final, when we get to P3 Gold, you're going to have a devlog that goes onto itch.io. Itch.io is the place where we're going to release your final versions of your game. That is the place where you're probably going to get the most traffic. You're probably going to get the most people to play, particularly if your game has strong aesthetics. That tends to attract a ton of players. Yeah, so please look forward to that. Don't forget to do this. It's not a huge thing, but you probably want to register your account, and you want to register an account because it can take a couple days to get that registration to go through to where you can post your devlog. So make sure you have someone do that right away. Tigsource.com does not seem to like @umich.edu email addresses, so if you have a Gmail, if someone has a Gmail address on your team, then please consider using that, okay? All right, good. Oh, we're almost there, aren't we? P3 Alpha already. Jeez. Okay, the last tip I have for you is, it's kind of interesting, but probably not super useful. One of the difficult things about your games is that whenever you go to a new scene, and many of you have many different scenes because, a scene is a good a representation of a level or an area. Well, if you have a bunch of manager game objects, sort of like this. If you have a bunch of manager game objects, singletons, that do a lot of centralized important work for you, and you go into a new scene and you play that scene, you start the game from that scene, then there's a good chance that you didn't remember to drag in every single prefab that you need into every single scene. I want you to think about this for a sec. We talked earlier on in the course about the issue of scalability and maintenance, right? And pipelines as well. So as more important singleton systems enter your game, what happens to your scene creation time? So chat, I'm asking you, let's say you have a new scene you want to create, but you have a bunch of singletons, and every week you seem to get another singleton. What happens to the time it takes to create a new scene as your project goes on and on and on in its development cycle? What happens to that scene creation pipeline as the weeks go on? What happens? It's not a good thing. I'll give you that hint. It's not a good thing. Umich Viru says, increases a lot, adds hard to detect bugs. That's right. That's right. You nailed it. Essentially what happens is you create a new scene and, oh, okay, my game doesn't run unless I have the correct prefabs in my scene. Okay, so I guess I have to drag them all in, and every week there's a new singleton, so I have to remember to drag that new thing in. And imagine this. One week, one of your team members introduces a new singleton system, but you don't realize. You don't notice. And so you go to create a new scene, and you drag in all of the singletons you know about, but you forget, you miss the one that your teammates haven't told you about. Bug. Instant bug, right? And it's going to be pretty subtle because this bug has just appeared in your game due to a cause that you didn't even know about in the first place. So that's going to be really frustrating. You'll have to ask everyone. You'll probably try and debug it yourself for an hour, and then when you don't get anywhere, you'll have to ask your teammates, and you'll have to hope that they connect the dots and they say, oh, I added a new singleton, you need to remember to add that. If they don't connect those dots, it's going to be another couple hours before eventually you all figure out what's going on. That's not good. That has already happened to you, Umich Viru? Oh, that's tough. That's tough. So that's really tough. It looks like your solution was we use a global singletons prefab to store all of them. And that's a really cool idea. Whenever a new singleton enters the game, you remember to put that into the global singletons prefab, and then it's automatically going to populate to every single scene. That's a really good idea. At Arbor Interactive, we tackle this in a slightly different way. What we do is we use an editor script. So editor scripts, as we've seen a couple times in this course, allow you to run code during the editor. So when you're in the editor, it'll run code. Let's go ahead and look at what this code looks like. Blah, 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 blah. The editor folder usually has a spawner script. The spawner script has logic. So what we do is we have an editor script that when that class is instantiated, as in when the editor finishes compiling, we register a function, in this case editor update, on the editor application.update callback, and then every single frame of our editor, we call a function called enforce prefab exists in scene. What this function does is it looks for this prefab somewhere in our project pane, and it spawns it into the scene if that prefab doesn't already exist. In other words, this is an editor script that guarantees certain prefabs are going to be in every single scene. And I think the full file's here. Yeah, so it's a little bit hard to read since it's just raw text. But essentially, it looks for the game object name in the scene. If it doesn't find it, it loads the prefab from the project pane, and then it instantiates it into the scene itself. Okay? And then gives it the appropriate name, so we won't keep doing it. So there are multiple ways to solve a pipeline problem like this, but maybe the most important thing is for you as a team to realize that your pipeline has a leak. Okay? Every single week, there are new singletons coming into your project, and there are new scenes coming into your project. How can you guarantee that any given scene will have all of the singletons that are needed as these new scenes and as these new singletons are being created? That's a tricky pipeline problem, but something that will eat up a lot of your time if you do not solve it. Okay? So here's one way to solve it, and then Umich Viro has a really good idea on how to solve it, probably in a simpler way in the chat. Okay? All right. So we're almost to our break, but I don't want to take a break quite yet. Today, as kind of one of our subtopics, I want to talk about games and education. Okay? And this might seem a little bit random, but in just a few moments, I hope you'll understand it's not. So I have a question for you. I have a description of a product, okay? And I'm going to describe some features of this product, and I want you to guess what I am talking about, okay? So the first characteristic of this product is that it's very goal-oriented. The goal of this product is to engage users on a particular topic. Now, the tools, the methodologies by which this product does this is using stuff like scoring progression, scoring methods. So we've got a product that engages users. It's trying to engage users on some sort of topic or information, and it is using scoring approaches to get this to happen. It has a difficulty curve where things start off fairly easy and then they test mastery a little bit later. Okay? So practice and then performance. The people who will use this Sometimes they are solo, but sometimes they are in teams. Okay? And the cost, it's expensive in both time and money for users to participate with this product. So the question, one of the students says, it's Duolingo. Is this Canvas? You're very close. So the question is, what am I describing? What are we describing? What do you think? We got Canvas, we got Duolingo. In other words, technologies that are meant to help you learn, right? Teach. Any other ideas? Any other ideas? What am I talking about? Let's see, I mentioned practice and performance. Where have you heard that before in this course? U of M? College? Interesting. Okay, so let's go ahead and move on, and hopefully 494, that could be the case, but let's go ahead and move on, and I think you'll get what I'm talking about in just a moment. I want to talk about education and games. Who has seen this image before? Anyone? Being alive. The Dino game on Chrome when you have no internet. Yeah, I totally agree. Actually, who's seen this? Who's seen this game before? Joe Dotson, Jellykid has. Ishwar definitely has. Now, this is a game called The Oregon Trail, and it's a famous educational game from the '80s. It was created by Don Rowich, who spoke with our course on occasion, and yeah, it's a really, really fun game. We're going to check it out in a bit. When it comes to games and education, you might think that, this is very tangential, right? It's not a very interesting topic. But if you look at people working in games these days, if you look at the companies that are really thriving, many of them make games and employ them in the active education. So how do we educate, right? The education industry is worth many billions of dollars every year. We have, I think, about 4,000 colleges in the USA purely for the purpose of trying to get knowledge into people's heads faster and more effectively. And so the question is, can you use technology and games to teach people faster and more effectively? The NSF, the National Science Foundation, absolutely believes this. I was actually just looking at my email like yesterday, and I saw that one of the companies they funded was called Prisms of Reality, and they specialize in virtual reality education gamification. And so if you look, they actually have a game out on Steam, which is pretty interesting. It's called Pandemic by Prisms. It is a game that I guess is sort of like Plague Inc. It is a kind of virus management, pandemic management game where you have to make a bunch of decisions to try and keep your populace healthy. You actually get to walk around like a crowded area, and I think the pandemic can spread if you get too close to people. I think oh geez, those germs are coming right for you. That's scary. You can see them. You can kind of build the simulated community and try and prevent the spread that way. You can see the contagion spreading among people who then spread among more people. Oof, that's scary. Anyway, it's a really, really cool idea. If you think that, oh, that's kind of cute, this company was funded by the federal government, by the NSF, for $250,000 to make that game. $250,000 to make that game. And this is a cool game, but I'll be honest with you. Just looking at this, I think you could make this. I think you could make this. If we handed $250,000 to many of the teams in this course and gave you 6 months instead of 6 weeks, yeah, I think you could make it. I think you could get this done, okay? So, anyway, yeah. This is big business, okay? There are some serious resources and a serious desire out there to help people learn faster and more effectively. And VR and game development is a big, big part of that these days. Okay, so I have another challenge for you. Okay, you did really well in the first one, but this one, I'm not sure. It might be a bit tough. So the question is, which game, what I could do with 250 grand, right? Yeah, if you create a startup and you put a good pitch together for the National Science Foundation, then you can get those bucks to go do really impactful, cool stuff with game dev. In fact, we had a local company that did just that, Spellbound, which is actually hiring right now. They have open positions in the Wolverine Soft jobs board. They're looking to hire some full-time Unity engineers. Spellbound AR. In fact, I think just about their entire engineering team is made up of 494 students right now. Chris Monteferrante, who's their engineering lead over there, was one of my first students, I think. Spellbound is a really cool product you've already seen that takes and uses augmented reality to help with pediatric medical care. So they build mini games. They just finished building a really cool scavenger hunt game where you're a kid in a hospital and we want to distract you. We want to get you out and about and kind of exercising your limbs, right, to keep yourself healthy and aid in recovery. So you have to walk around the hospital and find these stickers that have augmented reality tags in them. And once you find one, you get to play a mini game. You get to collect a new character, like a turtle on the pirate ship there. That's really, really cool. Anyway, this is really cool. And the team, Christina York and her company got awarded, I think, $1.5 million from the National Science Foundation to create this game. So that's pretty awesome, isn't it? That's not bad. You can do some stuff with 1.5 mil. And it's probably, in as far as odds go, it's probably a much more realistic and less risky way to get funding for your game company than going direct to consumer. The consumer video game market is really, really competitive, right? With about 100 games coming out every day on itch.io. So anyway, okay. So let's keep going here. So the question here is, which game do you think taught me to read? And so we've got a few games. I definitely didn't learn how to read in school, that's for sure. Reader Rabbit. Does anyone remember playing Reader Rabbit back in the day? A classic franchise. They had many games, many of them very, very cool, very fun. Jumpstart, First Raid Greeting. So we got the Jumpstart brand in there. I think I had that game. Reading Blaster. So many of you have probably heard of Math Blaster, but there's also Reading Blaster. And then, I don't know, how about Pokemon? Right, Pokemon being the game where you have a bunch of reading to do. And the question is, what game do you think was the one that taught me to read? And wow, did it teach me fast. Math Blaster, we got a vote for Math Blaster and Reading Blaster. We got 2 votes for Pokemon. What do you think? What's the verdict? Jumpstart? Pokemon, I learned so much vocabulary from move names. You're right. For sure, Pokemon. And you're all right. You're correct. Pokemon was the winner right here. Ding, ding, ding. One of the reasons that I learned to read so quickly and so early was because when I started playing Pokemon, when I brought that game home, it was amazing, right? I got to walk around this big open world that I had never had experience with before. I got to see these awesome images of these cool monsters come up, right? I got to choose my own monster. I got to talk with people. But the problem was I just couldn't really understand anything of what was going on. I would die sometimes and I wouldn't realize it. Sometimes I'd choose a certain word and a really cool thing would happen, but another word, nothing would happen, or the battle would end for some reason. In retrospect, I was clicking the run button. And so suddenly, my key to this amazing adventure that I desperately needed to go on, because all my friends were doing it, was to learn how to read. And so you'd better believe that I was sitting there with my uncle saying, okay, what does that mean? What is thunderbolt? Lightning? Oh, that's awesome. Okay, what does that mean? Okay, how do I figure this out? How do I sound this out? What does this word mean? What does that word mean? What is this person saying to me? Suddenly, there was this amazing carrot to go and get this knowledge. The knowledge was instantly extraordinarily valuable in my little kid brain, and so I got it very quickly. The motivation, in other words, was very there and very, very, very real. Okay, so I have another game that taught me something. Okay, the question is, which game taught me math and econ? What first kind of introduced me to the concept of mathematics and loans and financial health and stuff like that? What was it? Was it Magnificent Maths, a game so obscure that I could not find a screenshot for it? Was it Magnificent Maths, everyone? Yes, I was in an untrained neural network trying to figure out what the best actions were. Exactly. Was it Zoombinis, A Logical Journey? Has anyone played Zoombinis? Anyone remember Zoombinis from their childhood? A lot of people remember this game, but the number of people who do goes down every semester. When I first started teaching, Zoombinis was like half the class. Cool Math Games has gotten a shout out several times from Jelly Kid. I spent a little bit of time on Cool Math Games, but I almost never played the math games. I played like this marble rolling game, I remember. It was literally Rollerball. My first introduction to Rollerball was on coolmathgames.com. In fact, I was thinking about this the other day. I think the creator of Cool Math Games chose that name specifically so that teachers and computer lab instructors would go, okay, that's the only website I'm going to let you go to, because it's educational, right? And then you go there and there are a ton of non-educational games, and it was great. Okay, I used to be professional Zoombini. Yep, that's awesome. Okay, next up, Math Missions. Did anyone play this game? Math Missions. I think this game is pretty obscure as well. I don't think well, that's a bit of a spoiler, isn't it? But I did not play this game very much, if at all. Okay, or how about Roller Coaster Tycoon? The game where you need to build your own theme park. That sounds like a good time to a little kid, doesn't it? And as part of building your theme park, you need to manage your finances, and you need to kind of study, okay, can I take out a loan so I can build stuff earlier? Okay, what rides are getting me the most income, which helps me make more rides, right? Okay, so the question then is, which of these games do you think taught me the most math and econ? You're starting to feel old? I feel you. As soon as I hit 25, I started to feel super old. So please look forward to that. Suddenly everything gets like overnight, like twice as hard. Thrillville 2 filled this role. Roller Coaster Tycoon. I've heard of none of these other than Roller Coaster Tycoon. Definitely the last one. I turned 23 in a week. Congratulations. You got 2 good years left. I'm just kidding. Okay, definitely the last one. Yeah, it was Roller Coaster Tycoon. I don't think that's a surprise. A game in which you get to build your own roller coasters is going to be really, really exciting for just about any little kid. And when you get into the game and you start building roller coasters, just kind of as a dependency of building your park out the way you want, you learn about interesting concepts like revenue and like loans and stuff like that, like cash flow, which can be really, really, really useful to learn at an early age. You start to get into stuff like investing when you do that. Okay, so what about astronomy? And this isn't a game that I'm going to ask a question of. Astronomy is a topic that students might find a little bit interesting in their courses, but there are certain games that manage to sear certain concepts and certain planets and arrangements into your head. Let's go ahead and watch one of those. Let me know in the chat if you've seen this game before. This is a special move called Supernova during the final boss of Final Fantasy VII.